now by senior advisor at the Policy Exchange, Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Good morning, Rakib. We wanted to talk to you this morning particularly about this signs of movement within the immigration situation. Will this amendment to the migration bill mean that we can see these planes take off? What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion is what we've heard recently is a step in the right direction. The illegal migration bill did need tightening up in particular areas. Namely, one of these proposed amendments would be that the Home Secretary would be able to ignore these Rule 39 orders from the European Court of Human Rights. I believe this was one of the orders that was used to ground the first attempted flight, deportation flight to Rwanda. And another proposed amendment is that the UK courts would only be able to step in and block removals if there was a serious and irreversible harm if that flight was to take place, meaning that breaching the Human Rights Act would be insufficient grounds to block the removal. So I think what we're seeing here is a hardening up of the illegal migration bill based on that pressure applied by these Tory rebels that Olivia was talking about earlier on.
Rakib, Amnesty, not surprisingly, have condemned this. They say it's barbaric and inhumane. And judges should be allowed to take part in the process. But my understanding is the first level of this, the British courts, cleared this flight to go to Rwanda, and it's now being looked at again by a higher court. So, in a sense, the judges will have an input into this. It's just be British judges, not European ones.
Oh, and I think that's a very important argument to make, that ultimately, if we're talking about judicial supremacy, that should very much reside with the UK courts. What people may be frustrated with is that you have a Strasbourg-based court ultimately undercutting the judicial decisions which are being made in the UK. And many people would see that as a state of affairs which they would not find to be acceptable, Andrew.
Do you believe, Rakib, that the Rwanda flights will act as a deterrent to people crossing the Channel to Britain because their applications will be processed in Rwanda? Rwanda is now talking about taking thousands, not just a few hundred.
If I'm being absolutely honest, I think that the only way that we could tell whether or not it is a deterrent is if the flights take place. And then as we see those flights taking place, we see a significant decrease in the number of small boats arrivals via the English Channel. I think that's the only way that we'll be able to tell whether or not it's a sound deterrence measure.
Yeah, and this is going to have a big battle in Parliament, of course, Rakib. Olivia Utley was making the point, the House of Lords won't like it. So it could mean this could take months and months. They may be publishing the legislation today, but it could be delayed for months.
No, I think that's a very real possibility, Andrew. And I do think that the government, it has ramped up the salience of this issue, the small boats issue. Stopping the boats is one of the 5 main pledges of the Prime Minister. So I think that the bill, in terms of its workability, that very much remains to be seen. Will it have an impact on the number of small boats arrivals leading up to the general election? If it doesn't, Andrew, there could be negative electoral consequences for the government.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
This suggestion, Rakib, you know this topic inside and out. Forgive me, guys, is it the Ascension Islands? There's one theory that I heard this week, you might know this, that immigrants should be taken to the Ascension Islands and processed there. What do you make of that suggestion?
Well, there have been a range of suggestions in terms of the sort of offshoring processes. I think that the government seems very fixed on making the UK-Rwanda migration partnership work. There's been talk about other Rwanda-style deals being struck. But I think the key here is that the government, there's a great deal of emphasis on the UK-Rwanda migration partnership being a deterrence measure. So I think the government really has to focus on ensuring that that migration partnership works in terms of shoring up our border security, in terms of the offshoring processing of those applications. And I think that is what the government really needs to focus on.
It'll be interesting if it happens because, you know, Rakib, of course, Denmark, which is a country that's proud of its social democracy, is also talking to Rwanda about an identical scheme.
No, absolutely, and I think that this is the key point that be made by what I would consider to be old-fashioned leftists. That without a sort of restrictive immigration regime and sound border security, you can't really sustain an all-encompassing welfare state. And I think if that you have that unstable sort of membership of the nation state, and that you have this constant flux of what many people would consider to be illegal economic migration, then that poses a threat to the welfare state. And maybe if Labour makes that argument, they could see them a bit of a jump in the polls for themselves. But that very much, I wouldn't hold my breath on that front.
OK, thank you. Dr. Rakib Ehsan there with us.